training.tv. My name is Margaret. I'll be your broadcast engineer for today. Hope y'all are having a lovely day. It's good to see you all. Gonna hop that open. I'm here today with the amazing John Renfrew. Hello, John. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. End of the week, but obviously it's been exhausting preparing for all of these sessions and then delivering them. So,
John has been absolutely fantastic and has spent 5 days with us, which is nuts if you think about it. It's entirely an entire mini course talking about how to integrate OData with FileMaker, which is really absolutely fantastic. We're on our last day of that now. We're doing basically performance. Well, what we've covered has kind of become a little flexible, but we're doing day 5. I know that people sent in some questions that will be addressed. We do this 5 days a week. The last 5 days have been awesome with John. All right, John, I'm inclined to hand it over to you. What specifically are we tackling today about OData?
we're not quite going to do that program today, let's be honest, partly because we spent a lot of time on things and we want to make sure that we're not just saying, hey, we're going to do this and then not doing it properly. So I'll talk about what we're doing. One of the areas I think warrants a whole session all by itself. I will talk about what it is, but it's not something that is like it's worth covering really quickly. The first thing we'll talk about today is there is some help around OData. So I pointed at the beginning to the odata.org documentation and the Learn Microsoft documentation, which was more generally about OData itself. You can do a search on the internet for how to do something with OData, and there are questions. They're mostly focused around Microsoft people, but it's still helpful information. There is Claris help available. Specifically, there's technically an OData guide. That's the top is the reference to how to navigate directly to there. And it does contain an interesting page, which is unsupported features.html. I am going to say that as help, it's only of limited help. It does a job, but it doesn't do enough of a job. That's why I've just spent 4.5 days telling you all about all the things that aren't really in the help. The unsupported features also doesn't cover all the things that are unsupported, but it is helpful that the page is there. It has moderately recently been updated to cover server 2024/21. It previously went back to 19 and some of the references were back to 19, but those pages do exist, but they contain little things that we haven't talked about, like everything that we do has to be in UTF-8 encoding. So there are a couple of things in there that haven't necessarily been worth pointing at, but it's worth going and reading the help because that should reinforce some of the things I've said. Another thing I haven't mentioned is that once you've turned on OData on your server, in the admin console, there's also an additional log file, fmodata.log, that you can get to. And every single call that you make, every get on post, is logged in there. When you post, it just says, hey, you did a post from here, and this is where you posted to, but it doesn't contain the data. If you do a GET request and you have put things in the filter, then that is logged, and therefore you may want to make sure that not everybody has full access to your admin console, because it might give away some secrets that you don't necessarily want to know. You don't want everybody else to know. Another quick shout out, Steve Seftentera, or whatever it is, something like that. Steve SSH, I know him as, works at Beeswax. And in the middle of COVID lockdown, because OData had kind of relatively recently come on the scene, he wrote a couple of really helpful blog articles. So go to Beeswax, search for Beeswax blog. When you're there, search for OData. He was going to write 3 articles, but ended up only writing 2. there are some sample files you can download. One you can put on the server, one you can have on your client, so you can test out some OData calls that are written for you to see what the answers are. Some of the things in there I would have updated by now, but it's a really good starting point, again, if you really want to just start experimenting with OData. So there's help available as well. I personally, I'm on the FileMaker on the Claris community. So I'm also happy to, if you can find me on the community, I haven't got a different name or anything, Wizzo, but happy to try and answer questions on there, because then we can share kind of public knowledge as well. On LinkedIn if you're really that desperate to contact me. So we did say, let's just do we quickly showed right at the end of yesterday, there are some other words that we can add into our string, and I showed them working, but we can order or sort the results that we've got by using the order by keyword. So it's order by equals the field name, a space, and then either DESC for descending or ASC for ascending, very similar to SQL. Top just gets the first N record. So top equals a number, however that number is, we just get that many. And skip ignores the first number. So skip equals 3, we'll jump straight to record 4. There are times when that's really, really useful. You might want to get things in a batch of 10 and work through them and then skip 10 and get the next 10. It's also a useful technique, like I said yesterday, for getting the most recent of something. You just sort it in reverse order and grab the first one. So as promised, that's just a slide. I think all of those words are self-explanatory, and by now you should be able to work out kind of what they're doing. So the big topic we're going to cover before we get to questions today is working with containers, container data. Okay, containers are what we call them, but obviously we want to be able to work with that. And I've quickly showed you that slide, but what we're about to do is to jump off immediately. I'm going to grab Postman, bring it on the screen from across here, and we're going to quickly open our demo FileMaker file that we've been looking at. So this is on Richard's server in America. I'm working with it from the UK. So we've added a container field onto the layout, and this field in yellow just gets the field name of the container when we put it there. Okay, there, and we'll do the first thing in Postman, because again, one of the things we do, if you haven't been on this, is we also try and break things, because there are things we can learn from when something doesn't just work. Okay, so in Postman, we know which record I'm on. I'm on this client, and /image, the field name is called image. I want to do something to that field. I'm going to patch that record and that field. And in Postman, what I can do is go, okay, in the body, in the body at the moment, we've been putting JSON in here as text to send. But one of the great things that Postman can do for us is go, oh, we want to work with a file. Okay, so we're going to go off and select a file from my local machine. And one of the things I might want to store, it's a CSV file that I think I'd quite like to put into that container. Everything else is the same basic authentication. What Postman does for us as well is it automatically works out what the content type should be, because we've only been submitting application/JSON. Here, we need to know what the content type of what we're sending is. Postman is a bit of a nice helper. It does that for us. So I'm going to go, okay, I know that what I'm sending is a CSV thing. I've got a file attached. I'm going to send it. And I get an error. And the error says, no, you can't do that. And the reason is this bit highlighted. Only JSON, XML, GIF, PNG, TIFF, PDF, and JPEGs are supported. So you can't use it to upload an Excel file or a zip file or an Illustrator file or anything else. Okay. Now that one of the topics for today was limitations. This is a limitation. It's been extended from the very first iteration of OData with FileMaker because we could only we couldn't even do that list at the time. But it may just be that if that's what if you want somebody to upload something, it also doesn't support HEIC, which is the high-res Apple phone photos as well, because I did try that before. Doesn't work because it's a totally different thing, although technically it's a kind of JPEG. It's not. Okay, so that's not going to work. That's broken. Okay, but it does say I can upload something that's XML. And what do I have that might be XML here? I might have, an SVG. Let me see if I've got one in this folder. There we go, that one will do. So I'm going to attach an SVG. An SVG file, as you know, is just XML on the inside, but it's rendered into an icon. So if I look at the headers, Claris, Postman's gone, oh, it's an image / SVG plus XML. That's technically the MIME type. So I'm going to send that because it should be, different error. Syntax error in the request body. So I am going to say that even though Claris says you can upload files that are XML, in this case, it doesn't actually work. And if you have a .json file, it doesn't work. We're going to skip over that. I'm just going to say for you all, they're telling little fibs. There are still some things in this area that are not well defined and don't work as you might expect. So what we are going to do is we're going to do it with the thing that we know works. And I need to go to the right folder. And here's an image file. It's a JPEG file. It says a JPEG file should be accepted. Over here, here's my little container. I'm going to click send, move it out of the way. It works because I've got an answer here, which is return the thing, and it's a 200. And he's not here, unfortunately, but in honor of Richard, here is a helicopter. Here is a helicopter. Okay, you will notice that the original file name, here, is mh6_1994.jpg. It's got to FileMaker, but it's called untitled.jpg. Okay. If I did the same, we won't demo it because I want to get on and do some of the content. The same would be true with a PDF. Whatever we send, it's going to end up called untitled dot whatever it is. Now, technically, there is a way to add a header. If you read, again, Microsoft documentation, there is a way to force the file at the other end to have a file name. So I'm just going to quickly do this. I'm going to delete it so we can see it happen twice. Make sure I've clicked on the background so it's not locked. So I'm going to try and rename the file by sending this header. There we go, it's worked, but it still ended up as untitled.jpg. I personally think that's a limitation. I don't know whether it's by design. I've been asking some engineers recently about, is this actually supposed to work? Because obviously the documentation says, are you just ignoring it? The interesting thing is that we're used to seeing, hey, we get the whole record back because I patched it and I haven't turned on that header to only show me little stuff. The image field, and in fact any container field, doesn't appear in this list. It's just the fields that are dates, numbers, and texts. So it's legitimately there in the table, but I'm not seeing it here. Okay. So that's that first one. So what we were doing is a post. We can upload the file, and I was doing it, that method of doing it was doing it as a binary upload. I was taking a file and uploading it. There is another way to do it where we base64 encode the file and send that in a JSON object in the body. There are potentially reasons why that may be a good thing. There's also one reason why it's not as smart, because as you might be aware, when you base64 encode anything, it increases the size of the file by approximately 30%. So you're actually sending 30% more data. It means it's going to be slower. We'll show that in FileMaker. But there's the line. FileMaker says only JSON, XML, and those are supported. I'm not convinced about the JSON and the XML at this moment in time. And we can't fix the file name. Okay. So I do have in my FileMaker file, I've got a script. Let's just remove this again. Sorry, click the right thing, remove it. And it's gone. Click on the background. So I've got a script that would do the same in FileMaker. In my options, this line, which theoretically should change the file name, doesn't work. And the difference between the other days when we've done it, when this would say -d for data, we are sending a binary file. So we have --data--binary, but we're still putting it into a variable. What I'm doing is I'm using the insert file step to put into the variable data, and I've hard coded adding a file here, but we could be picking that from a folder, we could export it from a container, we could take it directly from a container field in my file. Lots of options about how to do that. And what FileMaker does is go, oh, you want to put that thing, which is a file, into a variable? Oh, that's fine. I can cope with that. It's been doing it for several years behind the scenes. So that script just does exactly the same as the Postman thing. This version of it, however, I'm doing the same thing. I'm grabbing an image, but then I'm converting it by base64 encoding it. Now then, in the header, the content type goes back to application JSON. The reason is because I need to set the JSON to be, I'm putting this base64 encoding into the image field. The other way around, I was directly saying I want this for this record in the field here. It's in a piece of JSON. If I look at the first FileMaker script, I have to put here in the content type the MIME type of the thing I'm sending. So image/JPEG with an E in that particular version. So we'll do the binary upload. It's going to have exactly the same result. There's just some slight differences in how I construct the script. Click go. And of course, I'm testing for, oh, it's not a 200, but it is a 204, which we know means, oh, it was done, no errors. And the 10 is coming from the FileMaker script step. And because the result is empty, it can't find a JSON, use a JSON get element. So I'm quite happy that that's fine. But we know now that if we quickly zip to Postman, the original create was a 200. When I do a patch with the base 64 version, it's a 204. File has got there perfectly fine, but it's still called untitled.jpg. Okay, so it's working. We can send files from somewhere to this remote file that's sitting on a server somewhere. But obviously that's only part of what we want to potentially be doing. So let's jump to, it's my file, but I'm going to go to this layout instead. So here's an empty container field in my file at my end. And of course, what I actually want to be doing is the FileMaker equivalent of this. So we're going to do a get command on that record and the field called image. Postman's very smart because it can handle, hey, I know what we're going to get hold of. Oh, bingo, we've got the photo here. So I want to see the same thing in FileMaker, of course. So if let me see if I've done this correctly. The get script, yes. So I've written the script like I think it might work. I'm going to go, could you go off and get that? And it's gone, yeah, absolutely done that. There are, however, some moving parts. I'm going to show the broken version now by just removing this. Save that. Let's click go. Nothing. I've got nothing back at all. Okay, let's talk about why. FileMaker, FileMaker doesn't allow us using curl commands to access the filing system on our computer. There's potential security reasons why we might not, and that's why we put data into the $data variable. I just call it data. It can't go, so Postman's quite fine about going, oh, I've got a thing, it looks like an image, I'll just show it on the screen here. We need to put the result that we're getting back from our insert from URL call into a variable. And this particular command here, or header, it is technically double dash fm dash return dash container dash variable. Means, right, if you get back something that's a file, I'm now going to allow you to put it into a variable. Okay, so what I'm doing here is when I do my insert from URL, I'm doing the insert from URL into a variable called result, which, as we know, can contain a file, and then I'm setting the field to be whatever that just was. Okay, whatever that is was in fact a file. So now I've fixed it. We'll make it run again. It's going to get the thing, and that's showing us what is in the result variable. It's a thing called image. It's FileMaker's way of going, I've got an image in here. That's all you need to know. But clearly it works. Okay. It's not going to change the file name because it's going to come net. It's going to still be untitled.jpg. But that, I mean, technically, that's how easy. On some levels, obviously, a lot more behind it. Few things to learn, but we can upload data into a container field on another file. But we can also get that. We can get that back locally. once we got it back locally, it's up to us to choose what to do. We may put that in a global field because we just want to see what the image is really quickly, or see what a document is, and then we can kind of throw it away. So I'm going to go. Any questions after that? Because that's like a bigger demo, isn't it?
The one question we had was before you talked about base64 encode, which was you can send text in JSON as base64 encode? Question mark.
Yes. So base64 encoded things is it's just a string. Okay. It says take this. Now this can be a piece of text, or it can be a file, a whole binary file. And it says turn it into a string of letters and numbers. It's a string. So therefore, it can be the value part of a piece of JSON. Okay, it can be massive, and obviously in FileMaker, if we get over 30,000 characters in a dialog box, it won't allow us to copy and paste it very easily. Okay, so we can't kind of mess about with it. There's a bit of a clever way around kind of doing that with a helper file to set a variable, but it's literally just a string. You will find that some things that you interact with, so for example, I have a customer, we use jot forms, and on there is a signature field. Somebody scribbles their signature in the bottom and it's returned to us. Technically it's a PNG file, but it gets passed as a string, a base64 string. The reason is you can't pass the actual file round using the method, the web method. And that's not how the web works anyway. If you look at an SVG on a website, you'll see, oh, here's the code of the SVG. An image will have grabbed itself from wherever it is, almost certainly as a base64 stream, and then at your end, it'll go, oh, I know what you are. I'll actually convert it into a picture that you can see. Okay, so it happens all the time. We're just not exposed to it here. We have to know that that's going on, and that we can specifically do that.
Cool.
If you look in the metadata at this field, I've got a field now called image. So we've seen different types of field types. The metadata for this type of field is an edm.stream. So that's what it calls a container field. Richard, nice.
I am here. I do apologize.
Nice.
Margaret, you've done just so you know base64, right? That has come up before. Yes, for you.
That was so I immediately recognized that because you and I beat our heads against the wall for that one.
But it's a good tool to use because it allows you to. It's like a Star Trek transporter for containers, right? So you can turn it into little atoms and beam it, and then it rematerializes on the other side. Yes.
And so you go, here's a string. It's a base64 encoded string. Here it is, and at your end you can go, oh, because I know it's this, I can then decode it back into the original thing that you sent.
It's in the pattern buffer, and then we have to rematerialize it. Thank you. We have to talk Star Trek here where we do that. So.
Absolutely. So, any quick questions on containers? Because we're going to move on to another topic before we.
If you export to Excel, can you assign a personalized name for the field in the first row?
Yeah, what we did yesterday was connect Excel to OData, which says, hey, here's all the technically fields across and rows down. They are what you called them in FileMaker, and they contain the data that OData is giving you back. We chose to ignore some of the columns and then clicked, okay, I'll have that, and it dumped it into Excel. So the answer to that question is technically no, because that's not what this is about. But in the same way, but if you wanted something to appear on the first row, then you could find a way to kind of do it. But anybody who's doing that kind of task would be just saying, hey, I've got a sheet of your stuff and it's live updatable. So that could be a program, it could be a list of names and telephone numbers, it could be kind of anything. So
look, I'll just leave it with one thing. You can do a lot of programming. They don't call scripts, they call macros, but you can do some pretty elaborate stuff in Excel. So you could have a pre-formatted, so.
That's another different week, isn't it?
No, I understand. I'm just framing it to let people know. Yeah, it's a big deal. Okay. And no, John's not going to do that for you today. Sorry.
Okay, so because we mentioned it at the beginning and everybody goes, ooh, we're going to do a really quick touch on to working with schema just to show that it works. I'm not going to teach you everything you need to know about it. But just as we said, hey, if you want to run a script, there's like a special hidden table called script, which contains all the scripts. There's a special hidden table for OData called FileMaker _tables. And you have to spell it exactly like that with the capital M in the middle of FileMaker. Okay, it's FileMaker tables. You can't create just a table. It has to contain at least one field. Okay, so you can't just go, oh, make a table. We'll circle back to that later. You have to make a table with at least one field, but it can be the absolute minimum that you'd need, which is the name of a field and its type. There's an example of what we're about to do. There's a pile of things that you can't set, but in a moment we're going to talk about the things that you can set. So we'll do the proof of the pudding. So there you go, Richard. We've just been moving a helicopter image.
Oh, I can't tell you how excited I am. I could tell you all about that model.
Yeah, we haven't got time for that. Here are the tables in my file that Richard has got for me, okay? We have clients, projects, items. We've got stuff on a relationship graph that matches those, okay? So nothing up my sleeve. It's not actually Penn and Teller, but we are about to do some actual real magic, okay? So if I do a post to the FileMaker tables, and in the body of the data, I say I'd like a table name of demo _table, and the fields is an array of JSON objects which define a field. So I'm going to create a field with a name of company space ID. It's going to be a number type field, and I'm going to set it to be a primary field as well. Okay, so that's like basically kind of the minimum I could do to create. But I'm doing a post to that table with that data. And by now, you trust me enough to know that as soon as I click send, it's gone, uh-oh, you can't modify the schema. Why? Because it can only be done by an account that has full access. Yes, so we've been using a special user which just had OData privileges all week. If I change, I now need to go into the authorization, and I think I've kept the password the same. I've got a new user now who does have full access privileges and OData privileges, okay? So if I click that, I've got 201, it's been created. What was created? This. I said do it as an int, but technically it's come back as a shouty decimal field. But if I go into FileMaker, go to File, Manage Database, hit Tables, there is Demo Table. Demo Table contains one field called Company ID, and some default things have been set. Because I said I wanted to be a primary key, then it ticks, it's a unique value and it's not empty. Nothing in storage, okay? OData can only affect the things that are in this part of the this part of the setup. So for example, we might say, oh, what that needs to be is a serial number. We can't create that. We have to come in and do a bit of manual work afterwards. So I'm going to turn the serial number on for that field. But it has created a table and created a field, and it's put it on the relationship graph for us. Okay, which is pretty cool, just from a bit of code. If I want to just click OK, wait for that to kind of resolve itself. If I want to modify the table in any way, what I can't do is modify the table name. What I can't do is modify the field names. The reason is I don't have anything here. You know, we talked yesterday, Richard, about the fact that behind the scenes, FileMaker is its own little database. So the record ID is its own thing, and we know that the table name is in its own little table, and the field names have got their own little thing. That's not exposed to us. So I can't say, oh, the field with an ID of 5053, could you just change its name? That's not exposed to us. So we can't modify field names or table names once we've created them. But what we can do is add more fields to that table. Okay, I've got a big piece of JSON here. We're going to go to the slide as soon as we've done it and show what's kind of going on. There's some kind of syntax error, which may in fact be true. So let me quickly scan it. That's got a comma. That's got that. That's got that. That's got that. I can't myself see what the syntax error might be, but there clearly is one. But then I didn't test it properly beforehand. Let's go to we'll see if we can fix that, because I do want to do questions. The fields, okay, the fields that we're creating is like a SQL type. So copied from the help, you can call a field any of these things in big words. It doesn't, you can do it in lowercase, but it can be a numeric field, a decimal field, a binary field, a blob field as a container. You can create repeating fields. So you can put what type of field it is and a square bracket in the number. That would be the number of repetitions. You can set, and it's a Boolean value, whether it wants to be primary or a unique value or a global value. And you can set some default entries. So, you know, like get modified timestamp, get username. So those are all the things you can set. And if it's a container field, you can also set, if you wish it to be a secure container with external storage, then you can give it the rest of the path after database location. So we can create fields. We have to tell it what the name is. We have to tell it what type is, and some of the options. But we can't make it a lookup. We can't automatically add a calculation to it. But we can at least genuinely modify schema, and then obviously we can post to the tables. We can patch the tables to modify them. We can delete either a single field or a whole table. Not going to show that. The other clever thing about the schema part is we can add or remove a field index. So if we're having a problem with indexing, we can just boot off the index, come back in 5 minutes, put the index back on. So that's what we can do with schema. So last part of the discussion is, so we clearly talked people through a lot of what we can do with OData. And it's not just what we can do, it's what other people can do. Point is, our FileMaker server can now be exposed to the outside world. Anybody who knows OData and we give them the right stuff, they can get data from us. That can be, as we saw yesterday, Excel. It can be another tool like Power BI or Click. It can be a fancy web developer, and we can go, here you go, here's how to get data from us. And because we're not using the data API, which needs tokens, it's a simpler call from them. If you're a big at all fan of Simon Sinek and that great TED talk he did about starts with why, we talked a lot about the what, but there are some why reasons, I think, for OData in FileMaker. Not just that we're exposing it to other people, but it means that we can use it ourselves. From where I stand, it gives us brand new ways to think about how we construct not just files, but whole systems. This is not like everybody suddenly, everything was a card window or everything was SQL, or it's not one tool to rule them all. It's not the one thing that's going to make everything work. It genuinely is not, okay? It's like, as Richard said yesterday, you have to pick the right tool, know how to use it, and know when not to use it.
Yeah.
You know, if all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. But for example, for those of us who have inherited systems which went back to FileMaker 3 and 4, when you had 15 files because you could only have one table in one file, and now they've all got external links to each other, and it's like a spider's nest, and when one of the files dies, you don't know where the file is, and it's chaos. Or we have developers who've created files in an inappropriate way, like with a table with 1,000 fields in, of which 500 are unstored calculations and 20 of them are, who knows what goes on in their minds. But often when we work with a file, it can be like putting a sack of bricks over our shoulder and before we even start to walk anywhere. So that affects performance. What OData does for me, it allows us to separate where our data comes from and where it's going to. We can think really carefully about where that is. And it doesn't need to be on my server. It can be on some other server. I have systems where, because I know I can run a script in another file, if I pass it a payload that says, oh, when you get there, could you just run this script in some other file for me? It means I can be completely disconnected from either of the files. I don't have external file links to manage. I don't have to set up security users. I just need the OData user. So I think it can simplify things, some security issues. So like if you want to work with an HR file, you can just have the people in HR dealing with it, but you can get data from the right set of data from it to use in the right place, but you don't need to have your own username privilege to get into HR and have the potential of seeing how much the MD earns. So for me, it's about data from and to any file on any server. Okay, so a quick for example is, if you have something that says, hey, if this error happens, I want it to be logged, okay? But what I'd actually like is to be logged on my server so that when the client rings me up and says, oh, we've got a little bit of a problem, I can have already seen it on my server, because as soon as the record gets created, I can notify myself for it. That's just like a really odd, I think there's some interesting use cases if we start to think differently about how we structure what we're doing. The other thing I've done, and I'm doing increasingly, is if there's really clever things that I don't want other people to steal, okay? I do really clever things with PDF, and I've been doing it for 15 years, long before somebody else has, okay? I've put all of that cleverness into a file. I can run a script that says, oh, could you just do this? Like, create this file and add these terms and conditions to it and do some numbering and various other things, and then send the file back. So that's like a little machine. I can call that machine with OData, do a task, and get an answer back. And at the same time, in this machine file, that's what I've started to call them, I can log the request and the result and the action. So something else I've done for somebody is being able to add a user to a Teams channel, for example. So the request needs, that's all OData on that side, but essentially you go, okay, go off in that file there, run this little script. This little script says, okay, you want to add that person to a Teams user, I'll go off and deal with the authentication token, deal with all the stuff. I will log what you asked me to do. I will log the response I got back to prove that I did it, so I can see that it was all done. And then I'll just give you back all you need at the end of that process is the Teams ID to put on that person's record. All the work is done somewhere else. Now, the advantage of that is that if you want to use that same functionality anywhere else in your system across multiple files, you don't have to copy and paste loads of scripts and loads of code. All you need to do is have one script that says, run that script with OData in that file, and I'm going to pass you the user's ID, and that's all you need to know, or the user's email. That's all you need to know in that. So it properly starts to enable some modular programming, kind of putting stuff into silos, which I've pushed this quite a long way because I'm a big fan of OData. But I think it begins to open up a door to saying, are there some new ways in which we could begin to think about how we structure big systems and stuff? So, and I can talk about that. I can talk about that bit for a long time, but I don't want to just talk about me. It's a kind of, if there are questions from the floor of the house, shall we say?
That would be good.
Happy to kind of start to get those, if not a slightly more general discussion about some of the, so what are the uses of OData?
We have one from Discord, which I'm going to toss your way. John said that you cannot change a field name because you do not have the field ID. Were you saying that OData cannot give us the field ID? You can get the field ID using SQL with the hidden tables and the data viewer. I'm sure you know that.
Yes, but you can't use OData to make any sense of that. Okay. That's kind of not, that would like be going, oh, I can just walk up to this Oracle database and change all the field names to what I like them to be. That feels like a really, Sonny, stop being so narcissistic. It's like, no, you just can't do. Again, what I've pointed out this week in a few places is you can do this, but you can't do this. But if we know where the fences are and inside that garden is perfectly useful for us, then go and play, but yet, no, it doesn't matter. Even if you had the internal ID of the field that you can get from somewhere, you can't do anything with it with OData, and it's unlikely that that's ever going to be the case.
I don't know. I consider the fact that you can delete tables via OData pretty wild.
Again,
even thinking about that makes me feel a little stressed.
So, first of all, you have to, let's repeat, you have to be a full access user to do that. So you have chosen to give somebody a username and password that allows that to happen. Okay, it's not something you use very often. I have used it several times where I've started with a known file. I get an XML file from the government every now and then, which contains a load of value lists. I was able to build the tables that I needed for the different types of value lists and the fields to contain both the ID and the English version of it. I was able to build those from the XML instead of doing what I'd normally do, which would take me all day. It took me all day to write the script, but now I've got it and I can redo it. I had a very interesting, I was on a thing with Ian Jemison, who's from the UK, does a lot of stuff on AI, talked about the idea that you could, so just float this as an idea. You could ask ChatGPT how to make what you need to make a database that did estimating in the construction industry, okay, what kind of tables would you need? What kind of fields would you need? And it's not as simple as just saying, oh, could you just do this? There's other things like saying, oh, you need these default fields called this, and we need to do this and this and this. But he has done an experiment where you basically can get back something from which you could use to drive an OData based script that says, go through these things, creating a table called this with this set of fields called this, and these are number fields, and these are text fields, and these are date fields, and create this other table called this with these fields. So the idea that at some point, I know 5 years from now, there'll be some embedded knowledge somewhere that says, oh, you want an invoicing module? Oh, here's all the tables and linked tables and things that you need. Here's the piece of JSON to create it. Throw that on your OData script. Just go off and make the tables, and then you can do a tiny bit of work to join them up and things. There's some very interesting potential because we can play with schema, but it's not something we're going to do every 5 minutes. It's going to be a biggish project-based thing. Really, it can be done. Wanted to show you that it works, but we're not going to use it every day at all.
Goblin Jerky 23, which he had the 802 question that I sent to you, John. Popped
Yes.
up.
So
I don't know if you had an answer.
The answer is there's every chance that it's something in the URL that you've constructed. I did manage to get myself an 802 error this morning. 802 is technically an error. It's a FileMaker error that says I can't open the file. It means part of the URL is correct and part of it isn't. Without seeing it, I can't make a guess at what that might be. But it's not like, oh, you haven't got OData turned on. That would give you a 500 and something type of error. That 802 is a FileMaker error relating to I can't open the file. There's something about how the URL is constructed that is getting in the way. That's the nearest I can give without kind of a more personal intervention, but I hope that helps.
Hopefully it tells you where to begin looking, like looking at how you spelled something or added a wrong slash somewhere, or who knows.
One of the things that comes up and people, FileMaker itself, if you live within its ecosystem, is very forgiving generally about how you name things and do things like that. But once again, as soon as you start dealing with outside data systems, with JSON, not JSON per se, but with the JavaScript and PHP and all these other sorts of things, the world becomes very precise, right? It's like the guy who crashed a lander on Mars because he didn't label his units, right? How many people were in school and you did a word problem, you didn't label the units and the teacher yelled at you? He didn't label the units. And so someone just wrote the units in on his assessment. And of course they were English or whatever. Can't imagine what they put, meters or something in there, and it was feet. And so the ship crashed into the side of Mars, right? And it was like 10, 15 years ago. And so that's where precision matters, right? And we start doing these other data systems. In the world of programming, we are analog creatures, but exceedingly high demands on precision digital work, shall we say, zeros and ones, it's either right or it's not. So, and kind of close only works, as we say, in horseshoes and hand grenades. And so, yeah, Margaret, I don't know if you have that question, but it's as we start doing advanced things, then, that fluffy forgiveness part of FileMaker kind of gets shelved on the side, and we start having to really, not use spaces or not use funny characters or not misspell the word FileMaker.
FileMaker loves you. All the other options are indifferent to your existence.
FilmMaker, as it often is in autocorrect.
Oh, yeah. And if you don't catch that, it does that too. Yeah. No, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Margaret, we got anything?
Kind of a very, it's gonna put John on the spot, but you don't have to answer right now. After the OData discussion is over, can FMTV get John back on to discuss how he uses the thousands of repeating fields for image management and what the benefits are? I think it's John who does
I
it.
mean, I don't even know if I would endorse that as a thing, right? I mean, I normally with the show is stuff that I kind of endorse loosely, but I mean that's like having a 5-part show on how to, set up a methamphetamine drug lab and to how to pay off informants that work for the police department, right? And then how to use your
I
firearm professionally to kill the bad guy. I mean,
yeah,
it's like, okay,
I that if somebody's picked, that's not what I would do. I did make the comment yesterday though that there are people we know there are people with guns roaming the halls of the FileMaker community looking for anybody that mentions the word repeating field because
well,
they
yeah,
believe they should be
the other
believe
one is
they should be
yeah,
shot immediately.
separation models. The other one, I wrote about that in the book. It's
Yeah,
really kind of a religion.
but then so is Anchor Buoy. I mean,
Sure, sure.
I never start from Anchor Buoy. I want to see how things flow into each other. I recognize that every now and then you need to create a second table occurrence to see a different thing from a different context. But I prefer the kind of complex angel version in which no
Ah,
lines cross, in which no lines
ah,
cross.
that's a Ghostbusters
It's
reference.
about,
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I don't tread on the cracks between the pavement, and I don't have my relationship graph with crossing lines. And when somebody gives me a file, particularly an in-house developer who's worked on something for 5 years, and you open the relationship graph and go, I have no idea what this does because I can't see how things are connected to each other. My first task is I go and sort it, I go and tidy their bookshelves, and then I go, so the reason you have five different table occurrences for the addresses is because you didn't write it properly in the first place. But I find it's also, although the naming strategy in Anchor Buoy gives you a clue as to how things are joined, because you can't have names that are 500 characters long, everybody shortens it to 3 characters, and you have to guess what a table occurrence is that somebody's shortened to 3 or 4 characters. It doesn't necessarily help for somebody coming in from the outside. It means it's been well structured, absolutely, but I don't want to start there with my projects. I don't do projects, to be fair, that are big enough to warrant having 1,000 TOs built in Anchor
Ah,
Buoy.
well, for those of you
That's
wondering
not.
about that, we'll be providing Anchor Buoy training later in January, and we will be here. And I'm saying that seriously. And we're going to explain to John or anyone else how to make it work for you. So trust us here.
But it is a religion, and I was bold enough in the middle to say, hey, I've used my coding style. It works for me. The point about any kind of thing like that, as you would agree, is as long as you are consistent, and
Yeah, it's a
preferably if
big
you're
part of it.
consistent, you are consistent and write some documentation to help other people, then it doesn't
Yes.
quite matter as long
No.
as, and I agree with you completely, as long as you recognize you're playing in somebody else's sandpit and they are making the rules, and maybe you have to adapt to them rather than going, well, it works in FileMaker, why doesn't it work over there? Which is, I have had those conversations over the last year and a half with people. Well,
Oh,
why doesn't
sure.
it just
I'm sure.
work? Well,
Oh, well,
because
y- you're not
starting
perfect.
your field
Sorry.
name, starting your field name with an underscore and putting an emoji in it and putting a 2 at the end, just don't. It and go back and look at the slides, go back and look at the videos. These are things you can't have in a script name if you want it to work with OData.
Uh,
If you don't need it to work from OData, carry on, that's fine. But the
Carry
minute
on.
you
Yeah.
do, here are here
Well,
are
and it's not just OJ.
here are the
Once again,
rules.
if you wanted to
And
interact with
SQL.
outside systems, yeah, SQL, outside
Yeah.
systems,
But
JavaScript, anything like that. So if you're
I
just staying, go ahead, Margaret.
I just said I did see some troublemaker the other day that was talking about naming all of their tables with emojis. So
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
I
just
mean, like FileMaker will let that work for a while. I just don't think it'll go anywhere outside of FileMaker, right? It's like, hey,
it's
So,
completely
correct, yeah.
ridiculous. I
it's
do. I, that's like that's an understatement, obviously. One thing I didn't. Well, if I'm using a script in OData, the first line of the script now says, "Do not rename this script. It is being used by
oh yeah, I
OData,
have a folder of
and it
those.
will
I have a
break."
folder of those.
For
Everything
example,
inside the folder. Do not touch these, or you'll be
yeah.
liquidated. Which
One
one?
of the questions that came in was about licensing,
Hmm.
and I I
Essentially, it's
thought
super cheap
just give
and
me
it's
one
almost
second.
open source. So
Yeah, buy it from
essentially,
me or buy it from Richard.
buy what?
No,
What are we
I
selling?
thought my apologies. I thought I had written this slide. Um, OData is like CWP, IWP, ODBC, JDBC. It's a method for talking to FileMaker
Okay,
data, and you don't need a license for it because you haven't needed a
correct.
license for any of those other things. Now, it's true that what Claris did was go, oh, we've opened the door with this new technology. We think we should maybe try and find a way to charge people for heavy use by putting this tariff on it.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just so that people did not stop paying for FileMaker licenses and build systems which could do everything FileMaker could do and just use OData to hit the server. They're trying to stop people avoiding paying for licenses, and I support them in that. Okay,
Yeah.
but the old, CWP, the PHP engine, none of that was ever charged for. It's not. It doesn't count as a user. Um, even if it was using a user license, every time you hit FileMaker server with an OData call, it's over. It's over so quickly that it wouldn't even register inside the 30 seconds it takes to work out how many users there are. I have sat with the admin console open and run OData calls, and you cannot see
They
the
never show
OData
up. Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
They
They
just never show up.
start and they end before the web interface refreshes, right? That's
Ab-
another thing we see.
Absolutely. So, okay. So the serious answer to the question is no. It's not part of your licensed user count.
Oh, we have the traditional question, which is, can I get the slides, and are you going to make the sample file available?
So the sample file is not. I can make a file available, but it's a file that Richard kindly hosted for me, which I had some fields that I could talk to and some things that I could add each day to say, oh, now we're looking at dates. So I've added some date fields, and last night I added a container field. If you want a sample file to go and play with OData, go to the Beeswax blog and look for the OData articles, because there are two files there: a file you can put on your server and a file you can work with on the desktop, which will run some OData queries for you to get used to. That
Okay.
it's like I say, Steve wrote it in the middle of COVID as a project. I helped him a bit with it. There's some things I corrected. It's not necessarily up to date. There's a few features but it's a great place to start. And once I've tidied up all of this, it's just been done in PowerPoint. At some point, I can make it available. But obviously, the other way to do it is to just go and watch it all on YouTube and take some screenshots.
Or we
I'm
could
not
leave
doing
the server up there and let people play with it. I mean, historically, that's what we do. We leave it up and then they find a way of breaking the server and then it gets shut down. But yeah, it's
Yeah. I can give people separately if people want to email in. We can go, here's the username and the password and what the file is called and what the server name is called, and it'll be up and running for X number of weeks if you want to do some to copy the queries that I kind of did to be able to do things, but don't break it for everybody else, kind of thing.
yeah, we do that a lot. We hope people behave themselves, and they mostly do.
Yeah.
Generally. I think other than that, we're good. A lot of people saying thank you. This has been a really interesting and thorough presentation, which is true.
There's been a lot to it. It's been a lot to it. It's good. So, yeah.
We haven't covered batch files at all. There's a couple of other areas where we've kind of skimped over. There is a potential to go, okay, once you've all got your heads around this and it's a bit more settled, there is clearly the opportunity to come back and do like some proper actual advanced OData with people. If you look for videos about FileMaker and OData, particularly anything that's based around Claris Engage, you will find that that's what I've been presenting about for the last 3 years. Also, the Engage U conference, which is over in Europe. I've presented there a couple of times. I'm presenting again in November. The thing we haven't talked about is we're now on OData 4.01, and there are some really key reasons why OData is not going away, and Claris are investing in it heavily. That's a whole starter for another discussion about what is going to happen to OData in the future. Now is a good time to get in on the ground and learn about it, because it's going to become more usable and more powerful in the future. And there are things I can't talk to you about that I do know is like improvements to it. So,
wow,
you know,
okay. So
at some point, let's go some point after, I don't know, maybe March time, there's the opportunity to come back and do some more in-depth, you know, what might be new.
So you're talking about 25 or whatever the next, because the next minor release is about a month away or less, right? And that's 21.1.
Well,
so
what's happening is the Claris engineers are gradually introducing more new OData things with each incremental version. We're not going to have to wait like a year for a big version for a big thing. Every time we get a new version, there are at least 2 or 3 new OData features.
All right, what else? Anything else? We're good. So then, John, thank you for coming on. And we want to have him back, Margaret. So, can we the official poll real quick? So, John, do we airlock into space? Neutral, airlock, have him come back. Don't have him come back. Don't have him come back. Thumbs up, thumbs down. What do we have? We need voting here officially.
The agreement is that he should come back. So
you sure? I want everyone who's saying he should come back to rethink that answer. Are you sure?
You're not just saying it to be polite.
No. Yeah, I mean, because you're kind of a questionable guy, and I just don't want to set a bad example with 5,000 repeating fields to make an image or whatever you're talking about. I missed that. Somehow I missed that, and I'm hearing that, and it's scaring me. So,
yeah, I'm frightened that somebody else heard that as well. But
okay. All right.
But yes, John has been universally approved. So.
All right, great. Well, then that's it for this week.
Thank you.
This weekend. Everyone have a good weekend. We'll catch you Monday with Nick.
Goodbye, everybody.